The boy's mom and dad would always say they didn't have much money and things were getting harder. He believed them without question and lived a very poor life until he secretly went to the bank. Brian Davis was never allowed to have a phone, and his parents also made sure he and his sister couldn't access their bank accounts or use their debit cards because they said they didn't have much money. But Brian started to get suspicious when he noticed his parents suddenly spending a lot. When Brian turned 18, his parents were away on a cruise, and he had a plan in mind. He went to the bank to investigate what was going on. Brian's parents convinced him and his sister to open joint bank accounts with their mom's name as the secondary account holder. They made this decision right after Brian's grandparents' will was announced. According to the will, Brian's parents were to receive nothing more than a piece of land. Meanwhile, Brian and his sister were set up with annuities paying monthly interest to both of them. Since the siblings were too young to understand money handling, they had no idea their mom could access their accounts. As time ticked by, Brian suspected something was sketchy about his parents' lavish lifestyle, considering how they constantly claimed to being poor. Something about their sudden riches didn't add up to Brian. While the parents lived in luxury, they made sure their children got nothing more than $50 Walmart gift cards each year. They never allowed Brian and his sister to leave the house ever since the accounts were set up. It didn't surprise Brian when his parents gave them the liberty only to pay the taxes on the interest, but nothing more was allowed. This continued until the parents seized their children's debit cards, claiming they'd have to manage themselves since money was too tight. However, it wasn't the first time they had done something like this. Some time ago, Brian's mom locked away his checks and debit card in a safe in her room. She outright told him he couldn't be trusted with money. Day by day, Brian couldn't help but suspect something was sketchy about his parents becoming overly protective of the money that didn't belong to them in the first place. When Brian turned 18, he reached out to the bank and lied about the debit cards being robbed. The cards were instantly deactivated. Since his parents were on a cruise at the time, Brian transferred all of his money to a new account, leaving nothing but $2,000 in his account so that they had enough left to return home. He bought a phone since he was never allowed to use one before. He then took the cab to the office handling his inheritance and set up a deposit for a new bank account. Brian set up a new account for his sister too, but she was not allowed to access her funds without a guardian or until she turned 18. With his newfound money, Brian bought a car and rented a house. Since his sister also wanted to move in with him, Brian turned to a random social media stranger legal advice forum for guidance. He asked if it would be kidnapping to take her sister under his wing considering she was only 17. Also, is what they did illegal? He asked about his parents using the money from the inheritance from which they were legally cut off. One social media user in his top voted comment advised Brian to seek legal assistance on the matter. As far as if what they did was illegal, I don't know, but a lawyer will. And you need one, the person advised, adding, also, quick personal advice, get a financial advisor. You just came into a lot of money with not a lot of experience in governing it. Seek out some help so you manage it wisely. Adding into this, take photos throughout the house so you have evidence of all the stuff they bought with your money, another user said. Brian also inquired if his parents would forbid his sister from moving in with him. People on social media agreed on the possibility and told him he could not stop his parents from wanting her under their custody until she turned 18. As for the inheritance, Brian was aware that his parents weren't allowed to access the funds. Meanwhile, it's still guesswork if he had confronted his parents about accessing the money without his knowledge. Several social media users advised Brian to hire a lawyer and a separate one for his sister since she was still a minor. Hopefully, with proof, she could file for emancipation on the grounds of financial child abuse. One social media user listed what Brian should do to gather proof and act immediately, including obtaining copies of important documents for him and his sister and taking photos of his parents' lavish lifestyle. Another person said, call CPS for your sister's sake and give them a statement before your parents return. Get dates for when the restrictions came. Get photos of the safe and everything in the house, like jewelry and other expensive items. Meanwhile, another person said, it's probably not worth fighting over the legality of past money stolen. Better that you look forward. Questions to think about. Is it acceptable to convince your children to open a joint account with you and access their money without their permission? In the case mentioned, the Brian's parents persuaded him and his sister to add their mom's name to their bank accounts without them realizing she could access their money. Would you ever consider doing something similar to your children? How would you react if they confronted you about it? Let us know in the comments section. Thank you.